5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone. I'm Mark Stunder with the Budget and Finance Committee. I'm an elder, and I'm also on the leadership team of Creekside Church, a new worshiping community way out there in Clarksburg, Maryland. And I'd like to welcome you to the Fiscal 22 Presbytery Budget presentation. First, I'd like to start with a big thank you on behalf of all the Presbytery committees, the leadership council, and the staff. 2021 and earlier 2020, well, they were tough years due to the pandemic and economic downturn and a whole bunch of bad news. But through your contributions of time and money, Presbytery's been able to maintain or even expand our programs to reach those in need, for churches that are transforming, to create new worshiping communities, to help college students, and to create mission opportunities both here and overseas. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And so now let's get into what we're going to do today. We're going to do a whole bunch of things. First of all, we're going to learn what the Budget and Finance Committee does. Then we're going to learn how the budgets are developed. We're going to review the two different budgets that we have at Presbytery, the operating budget and the mission budget. I think some of you may know that I'm a meteorologist, so I'll be using a weather-water type of metaphor. I just absolutely love the weather, and I think hopefully this is an easy way to make the budgets understandable, because I think some of you may know the budgets can be extremely boring, and one can fall asleep during budget type meetings. But hopefully through this weather-water flow type metaphor, you'll really get an understanding of the Presbytery budget process, and then what the fiscal 22 operating and mission budgets are all about. So let's get started. First of all, what does the Budget and Finance Committee do? What do we do? We have basically three different functions. First of all, we monitor radars. So we monitor the financial radar of the Presbytery, and we advise council on current budgets. The other thing we do is we prepare and present budgets for the upcoming fiscal year, as we're doing now, and we advise on how these budgets can be funded. And the third thing that we do is we deal with long-term budget planning. We look at problems, we analyze the future, and we look for solutions. So these are the three things that our committee does. In terms of reporting, you can see here on the right-hand side that the Budget and Finance Committee reports to council. We are a committee of council. We interact with Presbytery mission committees and operating committees, and I'll explain mission and operating side of the budgets here in a second, but we have a lot of interaction with them. We also provide financial reports for each Presbytery meeting, but it's important for you all to note that Budget and Finance does not debate the value of a program. We don't look at the need for the proposed program and so forth. That's the council's role, and that's also your role as a commissioner. In terms of the budget cycle, here's the way a year typically evolves, and this is 2021. The fiscal year starts on January 1st. We have basically an audit season in February, maybe it spills over into March. In May, we give a big picture council briefing on the budget, and then budget discussions within committees. This is at the committee level, not with Budget and Finance. The budget discussions within each committee begin in June and continue through the summer. This year, the Budget and Finance Committee for the fiscal 22 operating and mission budgets, we met in this time frame in the basically in the third, fourth week of September. There was a council discussion and approval of both fiscal 22 budgets on October 6th, and we're coming up on the Presbytery meeting on November 16th for your review and approval of both budgets. And just to let you know, fiscal 22 starts on January 1st of 2022. Now, Presbytery has two budgets. We have an operating budget and we have a mission budget. On the operating budget side, the budget's composed of three basic components. The Presbytery staff, and related to that's the office space and the various functions that go on related to the office. There's also the Committee on Ministry and the Committee on Preparation for Ministry. And then there's the other committees and functions. So these are the three basic components of the operating budget. Over here on the mission side, a separate budget, there's the mission staff, there's the Church Development Committee, CDC, and MCC, the Mission Coordination Committee. Also, there are other groups and functions related to mission. So these two sides of the budget are I guess you can say one big budget, but actually we look at them in terms of operating, and then we look at them in terms of mission, with two separate streams of funding. So how does this all start? How does a budget request start and flow through the system? Well, I've taken an example here. Here's a budget request for the operating budget. We're going to start with the operating budget, actually. And this is the 2022 line item budget request and narrative. So I'm not going to read all this to you, but the Communications Committee, as an example, they laid out what they'd like to do during fiscal 22. You can see how much money they're asking for and the different breakdowns, what they're planning to do in videos and webinar, workshop presenters and so forth, and what their rationale is. So each committee on the operating side and also on the mission side prepares a line item budget request and narrative. So before we go on in the process, I'd like to explain using the water management metaphor, an easy concept to understand both the operating budget and later on the mission budget. So on the operating budget side, there's rain, reservoirs, and streams. So basically, with inflow or the rain, that's considered the church per capita giving. So we'll call that the rain. Another way of funding the operating budget is a reservoir, and we're going to call that the fund, a fund. And then you can imagine between the inflow, the rain, and the reservoir, water comes out, and this is a funding stream that flows out to various presbytery programs on the operating side. So there's several ways the operating budget is funded. The two main ways are via per capita. It's rain. That's considered rain. This can be a variable. And then it's via reservoir. So the biggest reservoir is the office fund. And you'll see how that's distributed here in a minute. There are also two other ways. We have a pond, not a reservoir. It's fairly small, nonetheless very important, the pastor retreat fund. And I think some of you pastors have been on the pastor retreats in the past that will be coming up in the future. And this specific fund is designated to support the pastor retreat. There's also a special reservoir for scholarships, and that's managed by the Committee on Preparation for Ministry. And we draw on the resources of that particular fund to support scholarships in the presbytery. So it's interesting because budget forecasting and planning is very much like the weather. In the weather, we have to do forecasting and we look at future planning for climate and resiliency and all sorts of different things. We do the same thing on the budget and finance side. So we have all sorts of data that we look at on budget and finance, monthly data, quarterly data, 10-year trend data, 5-year trend data, the list goes on and on. We also have, much like meteorologists, we also have forecasting knowledge. So our knowledge is based on committee requests, both requests of the present and requests of the past, and maybe even requests for the future, based on needed funds and availability, and also patterns of the past. Weather is very much driven by patterns and pattern recognition. There are different things you look for throughout the atmosphere, throughout North America and the West and the Eastern Pacific to determine what can happen here in the Washington, D.C. area. It's the same thing with budget. There's a lot of patterns of the past and patterns of looking down the road, patterns in the future that we look at. We also have planning knowledge. We're always trying to be ready and plan for the future. So how is the operating budget created? Well, as you saw, the requests come in. The example I gave was communications request. But here are the different breakdowns of committees and entities with respect to the operating budget: presbytery staff, committee on ministry, committee on preparation for ministry, other committees and functions. And then per capita, the rain. So you can imagine all this information is flowing into budget and finance. And you notice that I've drawn this line, this red line again, and I didn't want to continue on and on and on, but this is to represent to you discussions, make any necessary changes that need to happen within these different areas. And these discussions occur with the various committees. And the end result is the fiscal 22 operating budget. And that in turn relates to all the different funding streams, the COM funding stream, the CPM funding stream, the presbytery staff funding stream, and so forth. So the operating budget, income, funds, and expenses. The operating budget income, once again, it can come from the rain, and that's basically per capita. And the operating budget funds come from the reservoirs, and these are the current levels of the reservoirs, or the fund levels, as of the beginning of October. The office fund was 841,000, and this is used to support the operating budget. The scholarship fund is $1,036,000, and the parish retreat fund is $32,800. The expenses, fiscal 22 budget's about 46,000 less than the fiscal 21 budget. So we expect to have slightly less expenditures in 22 on the operating side than we did in 21. Now, one of the big drivers in terms of the operating budget is per capita. So some of you may wonder, well, how do we get the per capita number? So what you're seeing here is a graph, and on the y-axis or the vertical axis, you see numbers. This is the membership of National Capital Presbytery. And across here on the x-axis or the horizontal axis, you see years. So what this graph is saying is that there were 33,116 members of National Capital Presbytery in all the churches in 2010. That current membership is 25,713. It's important to note that this number does lag. I'm not going to go into the reasons why, but it's with the way GA tallies things. But this is the number of record. The key number is 25,713 members in National Capital Presbytery. Now, each governing body, they set a per capita amount to cover their expenses. So Presbytery sets an amount to cover our expenses, Synod sets its amount, General Assembly sets its amount. There's an arithmetic that goes on. Basically, in simple terms, the set amount times 25,713 per capita per governing body. That gets you three different numbers. You sum the three, and that gets you the one big per capita amount that, that then gets put into our budget. So if we take a look at the fiscal 22 operating budget, the budget's funded in a couple of ways. As I've mentioned before, we're going to draw 175,000 from the office fund. This was the large reservoir that we have available. And that's actually going to leave about 491,000 left in the office fund at the end of fiscal 22. So the way we do that math is relatively simple. We take the fiscal 21 current amount, 841, minus the fiscal 21 draw, which is 175. In the current budget, the fiscal 22 budget draw of 175, we're going to end up with around 491K or so left in the office fund at the end of fiscal 22. This number is important because if we maintain an annual draw of 175,000, we're going to have to maybe the middle of fiscal 24, third quarter of fiscal 24, until the office fund runs out. The council is aware of this, and certainly we on the Budget and Finance Committee are aware of this, and we're starting to come up with our analysis and different options to present to council on what to do about this. Also, there's a 40K draw from another reservoir, which is the scholarship fund, and that scholarship fund is currently at $1,036,000. In addition, we also fund the budget per capita, the rain that I talked about. The good news is there's no per capita raise. Yay, there's no per capita raise for fiscal 22. So here you can see the breakdown, General Assembly, Synod, National Capital Presbytery components of per capita. And so for you church treasurers out there, $42.67 will be the per capita rate for fiscal 22, which is the same as fiscal 21. So what I'd like you to do when you get a chance is to review the operating budget. What you should look for in the Presbytery packet is something like this. Now, at the time of the recording, of this recording, the budget was still being produced to be put into the Presbytery packet, but it's going to look something like this. Just look for the operating budget, and there's all the different detail. You can see the different funds on this particular page, the different reservoir streams that we have coming in, and then what's going on later pages, indicating the different streams coming out. The motion that you'll see on the floor of Presbytery will read something like this: set the operating fiscal 22 operating budget at that amount, and it should say something along the lines of reflecting no change in per capita rates for 2021. So now we've got the water management metaphor for the mission budget. So there's the rain, the reservoirs, and the streams also for the mission budget. This time, the rain is considered the church unified giving, and it can be a variable. Sometimes it rains hard, sometimes it doesn't rain that hard. But the inflow is the church unified giving, the rain. We also have reservoirs on this side, on the mission side. And as you can imagine, we have outflows from the combination of the rain and the reservoirs. We have outflows into different funding streams on the mission side. So the mission budget's funded in several different ways. This is the key driver here. That's unified giving, and that comes from you all. Thank you very much for your contributions. And that's the rain. We also have, as I mentioned, several reservoirs. We have the Resurrection Fund and also the DC Resurrection Fund. We have the New Growth Fund. And for those of you that don't know about this, the New Growth Fund is an early 2020 combination of the New Church Development and the Neelsville Disaffiliation funds. And that was created early 2020 for a combination of those two funds. And when those funds were combined, they created the New Growth Fund. This New Growth Fund is used for new worshiping communities in our presbytery. So how is the mission budget created? Well, the same basic flow pattern occurs here as it did on the operating side. So we have all the different requests come in, presbytery mission staff, Church Development Committee. Church Development Committee, by the way, is involved with transforming congregation, new worshiping communities, things of that nature. MCC, Mission Coordination Committee, they're involved with mission type activities, networks, mission in the United States and mission abroad, and also college ministry. And there's other groups and functions that also come underneath the mission budget. Then there's unified giving, which is the rain. So you can imagine all this data flows into us at Budget and Finance. And once again, I didn't draw all the swirls out here, but there are discussions that we have if needed, and we make any necessary changes in coordination with the committees. And also we take a look at the different reservoirs being injected into the system. Out on this side comes the fiscal 22 mission budget with funding streams related to each different individual mission program. So how do we look on the mission side? Well, it's important to understand unified giving, and this is the unified giving, or the rain, so to speak, over the last 10 years. So to further look at this slide, on the x-axis or the vertical axis, you see dollars, and over here on the x-axis or the horizontal axis, you see time in years. And you see around 615,000 in unified giving in 2010, and it's gone down to a projection of around 433,000 for fiscal 21 coming out here this year and the end of last year. So 30% decline or so in the last 10 years. This trend has continued downward, and fortunately, we have some of our reservoir funds to make up for some of this, but nonetheless, the trend is still down. So the fiscal 22 mission budget, the budget request for fiscal 22 is shown an increase of around $62,000. All requests were incorporated, so that was very good. We were able to honor all requests, able to fund all requests. In terms of the funds themselves, there's normal draws from the different reservoirs that I've explained to you. So here's the three big reservoirs: Resurrection Fund. The current level of this particular reservoir or fund was around 3.4 million or so. Its fiscal 22 draw will be around 119,000. The DC Resurrection Fund is at $1 million or so. Its draw will be 34,000 in fiscal 22. And the New Growth Fund, its current level is around 1.7 million, and its draw is going to be around 227,000 in fiscal 22. So when you have the chance, please take a look at the mission budget details. You should look for, in your presbytery packet, something that looks like this. Once again, this was produced earlier than the official packet. This video is coming out, or I'm producing this video before the official packet is released. But it's basically going to look like this with mission budget and receiving center. You'll see all the different funds that are coming into play. And then on the pages that follow this, you'll see the different breakdown. Actually, here's one right here, Church Development Committee, and you'll see all the different streams that flow out of the of both the rain here and of the reservoirs. Please come with any questions regarding the mission budget, also to open space prior to November Presbytery meeting, or you can email them into the Presbytery office. The motion that you'll see on the floor of Presbytery will read something like this: to set the proposed fiscal 22 mission budget at that particular number. So what can we say in closing? First of all, to give you a summary, it looks like we have a balanced operating and a balanced mission budget. There's a slight decrease in the operating budget of around $46,000, and there's a slight increase in the mission budget of around $46,000. What I'd like to do is spend a second and talk to you beyond the numbers. And I think it's extremely important to understand things beyond the numbers. There's a new initiative that's going to be starting up in Presbytery, and it's called So That Our Churches Can Grow. For those of you that have a chance, currently on the Presbytery website, there was a video by John Molina Moore, a general presbyter, explaining this. And I think it's important that when you think about growth, normally we all think about the numbers. And as a meteorologist, I certainly can appreciate the numbers. We all think about the numbers, we all think about the metrics and the attendance and the membership and all sorts of things. But if you stop and think about it, Jesus really never did think about the numbers. He didn't think about membership, he didn't think about attendance. He was just out there trying to help people. And so the whole point of So That Our Churches Can Grow is it's not all about the numbers. Instead, it's really about how to extend your church's reach and how to deepen your church's impact. So the fiscal 22 budget that I just showed you on the mission side is basically the beginning of how this presbytery will live into this into the new thinking of so our churches can grow. We have a great general presbyter in John Molina Moore. We have great presbytery staff. We have great committees and great committee leadership. So I would suggest that if you have any ideas related or thoughts related about your own growth at your own church, please contact the Presbytery office with those ideas. And I'm sure that Presbytery staff or Presbytery committee will get back to you and begin to engage with you and talk about your ideas and your thoughts about growth. So friends, this concludes the fiscal 22 budget presentation. I hope you've gained an understanding of the fiscal 22 operating budget and the fiscal 22 mission budget. And I hope you all take advantage of the different programs and resources that Presbytery has to offer. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you around Presbytery. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.